Welcome to another episode of the 2021 Overwatch League Team Preview Series. This time around, we'll be exploring the Atlanta Reign. I've been looking forward to this one because they're a weird team to think about. This is the first time they've made noticeable changes since they became an expansion franchise in Season 2. But even so, they still feel like a similar team to last year in a way. It's hard to wrap your head around this, so let's get an idea of what they're working with a recap and evaluation of their offseason. I guess I should start by stating, it's no secret that the Reign are coming off a disappointing season. Many fans had high expectations for them, and I think they themselves had pretty high standards about where they wanted to be. So to flop as hard as they did and be middle of the pack was a huge wake-up call. It showed that changes were desperately needed if they had any sort of intention of having a comeback year in 2021. Needless to say, they went to work immediately. The Atlanta Reign dumped a ton of players, making them go from one of the biggest rosters in the league to one of the smallest. We would see 7 players get booted off. They are Fire, FRD/Fried, whatever you want to call them, Sharp, Dogman, Erster, Pokpo, and Saucy. Maybe besides potential emotional attachments, most of these guys leaving is not something to cry over. Fire, FRD, and Sharp were never played anyway. If you can recall, Fire literally came in just to play Brig those few times, just because Masa wasn't really getting the job done. Meanwhile, FRD was in there mostly for Zarya metas and to synergize with Pokpo, you'd have to imagine. It's not really worth holding on to these types of players when you don't need them, especially when money is a bit tighter than usual. Next up with Sharp, his story feels very sad to me. He was a promising rookie DPS player who never really got a chance to shine for a variety of reasons. For one, the role he really wanted to play was filled by Edison. According to Dogman, Sharp was not all that interested in playing a lot of sniper characters or anything like that. He really wanted to play Tracer, but Edison was simply better. They tried playing him on Sombra, then Ashe at the end of the year, but Sharp couldn't really find a way to fit in. It really sucks too because there was a lot of skill and potential there. It makes you wonder why the Reign even picked him up to begin with. Saucy was another departure, which was totally expected. As a mid-season pickup, he was brought in with the hopes of having that void at flex DPS be filled. It felt promising given the Atlanta Academy synergy with Gator and Hawk, but it just wasn't meant to be. To be brutally honest with you, Saucy did not leave a good impression. He was not ready for this promotion at all. He was lackluster even against some of the weaker teams in the league. The other 3 give off a bit more of a lasting impression. Dogman leaving feels like a part of this team's soul has been ripped out. Through all the ups and downs, he's always been a crowd favorite over in Atlanta. The banter and personality gave this team some extra spice, but sadly, he never showed any improvement compared to Season 2. It felt like he was maybe on the rise towards the end of 2019, but he never truly figured it out in Season 3. He was unable to take that next step in his game. He was still mediocre, and that's a problem. Support gaps were a common theme for the Reign. Those opponents they really struggled to defeat were always one step ahead thanks to better overall support play. Their premier flex supports would always outplay Dogman. Plus, the Reign really seem to like Iris. They feel there is something special with this guy, so there's no point in having Dogman anymore. With Pokpo and Erster, it really hurts to see them going on such a sour note. Both of them found themselves on the bench more often than not in 2020. This especially goes for Erster. Between some potential regression, being unhappy with the team, and poor coaching, Erster could no longer be the carry. It's a shame too because things were looking so great in Season 2. He was a consistently brilliant piece who felt like he'd be a staple or at least a superstar for years to come. All the talk was about him and Edison becoming the next big duo, but it never worked out. Somewhere along the line, there were some serious screw-ups. Now Erster gets to play for the Dragons, where the Reign have to pray he doesn't make them regret not setting things right. What a shame to see it end like this. There was so much potential there. And I kind of feel a similar way about Pokpo. He played far more than Erster did, but the team still preferred him on the bench for some reason. I'm assuming it's a synergy thing plus some other internal problems, but oh man did it feel like a mistake, because whenever Pokpo was in the game, he felt like the more impactful player compared to Gator. He ended up just being this Winston specialist, which felt so wrong to me. Given that the Reign didn't utilize him all that much, I guess it could be worse, but I can't help but feel like they seriously screwed up with this guy. Along with these players, a big chunk of the coaching staff was cut off. No more Silence, Mentalist, or Kodak. As a side note, Silence retired, so it might not totally have been the Reign's choice to see him off. The other 2 though, I'm assuming they just weren't getting the job done, because it is no secret that the Atlanta coaching staff did not do a great job in 2020. Even Dogman has recently come out on his show saying they didn't always do their job all that well. So it goes without saying that I definitely support them parting ways with some of these guys. The coaching can be just as important as the players. The Reign didn't take this entirely to heart though, because Sephi still does remain as the head coach, at least for right now. The org wants to have faith that a fully Atlanta and Atlanta Academy-based coaching staff is going to do the trick. I personally think this is the wrong choice, but we can talk more on that later. For now, I just wanted to say that I do not endorse them picking up 0 new coaches this offseason. If anything, I wanted them to do a full-on reset. In the meantime, let's discuss their 2 new player additions. So back in November, we found out that the Reign had once again won the bidding war for a big-name DPS when they announced the signing of Pelican. How the Reign managed to keep getting their hands on these premier DPS players out of Korea is beyond me. But let me tell ya, this was a great way to try and address their flex DPS needs. As a member of O2 Blast, he's nearly been biding his time. It's been known for quite a bit now that he is an Overwatch League caliber DPS player. The problem has always been the age requirement for the league, because he only turned 18 back in June. While he killed all this time, he's been showcasing some very promising results in contenders. The man is very skilled. There's still a few things he needs to work on, like his Sombra for example, but that's nothing that can't be solved with Overwatch League level resources at his side. But generally speaking, he is a solid flex. He's proven on characters such as Echo, Genji, Mei, and Tracer. He's talented, no doubt about it, and if he can play at the kind of level that Erster and or Edison did in their rookie years, then he might be the answer the Reign have been looking for at this position. After the early stages of Season 3, DPS definitely became a problem. Edison felt like the only one showing up in any sort of consistent manner. The flex role could not be resolved for whatever the reason. They tried Erster, they tried Saucy, but nothing seemed to be clicking the way they wanted it to. With the ceiling that Pelican possesses, he could be the one to spark some change. Speaking of big-time pickups at DPS, the Reign kept the ball rolling with the addition of Kai, formerly known as KSP. The Reign have supposedly had interest in Kai since the very beginning of the offseason, so when the Valiant announced the release of their entire roster, Atlanta were probably licking their lips in excitement. And I mean, who wouldn't? Kai was literally one of the best hit scan players of Season 3, and he'll work with someone like Edison in perfect harmony. Kai is going to be the better overall sniper and McCree, then Edison is going to be the better tracer and could probably run some Reaper or maybe some Sombra as well. Kai is another guy who is going to add needed consistency at the DPS position. He might do it even more so than Pelican because he's already proven he can play against basically anybody in the league at his position. I talked about it during my initial reaction to this pickup, but Kai allows for all the DPS players on this team to play their comfort picks. They can all dominate using their specialties in what appears to be a killer rotation on paper. And that actually wraps up the Atlanta Reign offseason as of this video. For once, these guys did not go big. My overall opinion on how they did is pretty mixed. On one hand, they made some killer additions at DPS. I mean, oh my goodness, it feels incredibly well-rounded. There is practically limitless pop-off potential there. But on the other hand, everything else has remained largely unchanged. I'm happy they cleaned up the roster, but the cleanup was not thorough enough because they're going with a lot of the same options at tank and support. And while none of these 4 are garbage players, some of them only feel like they're slightly above average at best. And don't even get me started with their decision making with their coaching staff this offseason. With all of this in mind, I think I'm going to give the Reign a B- as their offseason grade. I really don't know why they decided not to entertain the thought of getting a new head coach. This is really bothering me and has hindered their grade greatly. Besides a few upset wins in Season 2, Sephi-controlled teams have been largely unsuccessful against top-tier competition. His teams have been unable to show up in big games far too often. It's disappointing to see them come up short so many times when they're capable of a lot more. He's had so many talented players at his disposal, but for some reason, a lot of the time he can't really get proper use out of most of them. And it's not like Season 2 didn't have its ups and downs either. Stage 4 and their first few playoff games were fantastic, but before and after that were not the prettiest things to behold. The way they would sometimes just lay over and die is something that they've never been able to get rid of, and in my opinion, the Reign desperately need a new head coach and control of this roster as a result. They need somebody with new ideals on what this team should and should not be playing. There's always the chance that Sephi will end up redeeming himself, but it feels like Atlanta dropped the ball given all the criticism we've been hearing as of late. As I've already stated, I'm not a huge fan of the tank or support duo either. Listen, Hawk and Gator have great synergy, but their skill level doesn't quite reach where it needs to be as a duo. Outside of Orisa Sigma, they don't feel all that capable to me. Gator's like a good wrecking ball, and I guess Hawk could play like Diva, but it feels to me like the Reign are missing a few things to achieve maximum versatility here. I understand wanting to give a relatively fresh duo another chance, but I have quite a few concerns when it comes to some of their competition. And I feel a similar way about the supports, more specifically Masa. He regressed a lot compared to Season 2. His Brig proved to be a big-time weakness in his game, and I really don't know if he'll ever improve to a respectable level on her. I think the rest of his hero pool is pretty alright, but it feels like his skill set is not as impressive as it once was, simply due to the main support position getting a lot stronger these last few years. Iris is a bit more difficult to judge. He was not all that impressive when he played last year, but he also was a mid-season pickup who was trying to learn a completely foreign system. While I don't have absurdly high expectations for this guy, I'm at least willing to give him a fair shot this time around. The Reign do seem to like him quite a bit, so maybe there's something there. Perhaps he could develop into a reliable option with enough time. But even so, the Reign tanks and supports on paper do not look amazing, no matter how you slice it. And that's a shame because their DPS look very promising. It's the only reason they got the grade they did. Kai and Pelican were both massive pickups. It was the saving grace of their offseason. These guys have a lot of promise, and I genuinely do believe they will help this team win a few games that they really have no business winning to begin with. Just pocket them and watch them go to work. But there's only so much those two plus Edison can do on their own. Having 1/3 of your starting lineup consistently pull their weight only gets you so far. That's what worries me about them facing off against any sort of halfway decent squad. Can I expect Gator, Hawk, Masa, and Iris to consistently show up? They could all maybe end up being around middle of the pack, but that just means they'll be no better than last year. Maybe they win a few more games because of their better DPS, but this team's overall success, it might genuinely come down to a few different factors. With that in mind, I'm predicting that the Atlanta Reign finish anywhere from 15th through 11th place in the overall standings. Yet again, they seem like a middle of the pack roster. It feels close to the same product as last year, but with more explosiveness at DPS. That's the only real difference. Everything else remains largely the same. No noticeable changes or upgrades at any other position. Both the meta and some of the other question mark teams in the league who could either flop or live up to their potential are the few factors that I believe determine where this team could realistically finish in the standings. Their fate largely feels out of their own hands to me. The good but not great players outside of DPS plus the questionable coaching makes me believe they are in a bad position this year. What metas outside of like double shield and maybe wrecking ball stuff could they realistically be amazing at? Maybe rush, I guess? It feels to me like Season 3 is going to play out all over again though. They take advantage of the bad teams on their schedule, then mostly lose to the rest. There's too many trust issues at multiple levels for me to assume they'll be anything more. Think about it in your head for a second. Do you realistically see them defeating the Shock? How about the Justice? The Mayhem? The Fuel? I know I certainly don't. They feel more like Boston and Toronto caliber, and even those teams still might have a serious edge over them. So maybe they're more so in a tier that's slightly below them, but also higher than the likes of London, Vancouver, Paris, and Houston. All players I have addressed concerns over, as well as the coaching staff, would have to seriously go above and beyond if the Reign want to be anything more than average. Sorry for being such a big-time Reign doubter, but I really can't help it after last year. They got exposed and pretty much did nothing about it this offseason. Believe me, I truly hope to be proven wrong because I want every team to do well, but right now, this team has a lot to overcome if they wish to go from pretender back to contender. With that said, that's going to wrap up my offseason recap and team preview of the Atlanta Reign. So now I want to hear from all of you. Do you think the Reign are going to be noticeably different from last year, either in a positive or negative way? Or do you share a similar mindset that I do? Leave a comment down below and let's keep this discussion going. And remember, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe if you want to stay up to date on this series. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.